Hi, and welcome to Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin. We are broadcasting live from the studios of the American Gun and Glory Network here in Las Vegas, Nevada. This show, today's show, is a little different than what we normally do. In light of the anniversary of Pearl Harbor, December 7th, this show is kind of written in honor of those patriots who lost their lives at Pearl Harbor. My guest today is Lenny Davis, sitting to my left. Lenny, can you give a little bit of background again? Just
Sure,
for
Bob.
new listeners?
Yeah, my name's Lenny Davis. I'm a retired special agent with the Department of Homeland Security. I also am a certified anti-terrorism instructor for the U.S. State Department. I teach anti-terrorism all over the world to friendly governments. And I am currently the Director of Investigations and Training for Techstratics International, a security and private investigations firm here in Las Vegas.
Today's show, as I said, is going to be a little different. Because of the Pearl Harbor anniversary, we're going to dedicate the largest portion of the show to that event and the lives lost there and how it happened and why. We're going to break for just a second and run a fast commercial, and we'll be right back with the beginning of the show, which, as I said, will be dedicated to the Pearl Harbor event and subsequent events. Don't go away.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Do you have a firearms trust or need one to pass your guns along? The Justice Department, BATF, has changed the rules in the recent past. If you have a firearm trust, particularly a Class 3 firearm trust, it needs updating. My longtime friend, Attorney Jerry Creed, is an expert in these trusts. Call Jerry at 702-806-7777 at his Summerlin office for a free appointment and evaluation of your situation. That's Jerry Creed, 702-806-7777. Don't end up leaving your firearms to the government because you have an invalid or out-of-date trust. And we are back. As I said prior to the break, this show is being aired on December 7th in honor of the many American heroes who lost their lives in defense of the United States that faithful morning. For those of you who don't study history, and I'm watching some television shows about how little today's younger generation, if that's polite, know about history. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese did a surprise attack on our military bases in Hawaii that became the catalyst for us to declare war the next day, actually, against the Axis powers. Our Pacific Fleet was at Anchorage, and the attack from the air by the Japanese Navy started at 7:55 a.m. on a quiet Sunday morning. Within 30 minutes, Japanese torpedo planes made 4 attacks, dive bombers 8, and after a 15-minute lull, another full half hour of vicious bombing and torpedo attacks was started. The whole thing finally ended at 9:45 a.m. The USS Arizona is still at the bottom of the bay and now serves as a memorial to our horrific losses suffered at Pearl Harbor. We had 2,403 people, service people killed, 1,178 additional wounded. The Arizona still entombs over 1,000 American sailors and Marines. The attack ultimately backfired. as a Japanese general, Yamamoto, said that they had awoken a sleeping giant. Turned out that was true. And as we know, World War II ended in our favor with the Japanese and German loss. Lenny, I assume you visited that memorial in Honolulu?
Yes, I've been there a couple of times, actually. It is amazing to go out there and take that little boat ride out to the memorial, and how quiet everyone gets, and reverence of that. I've also been, a friend of mine is on the National Park Service underwater archaeological program, and although I didn't get to dive the Arizona, I went out on the boat with them when they interred some remains of one of the crewmen that had passed away a few years ago, and the divers from the National Park Service took them down and placed it basically just inside the Arizona so he could be with his shipmates.
I've been there to that memorial twice myself, doing some work in Hawaii earlier in my life, and there were some surviving veterans there who were there, would answer questions and explain that part of their history from eyewitness accounts, basically. There are a few of them left. Now, I'm wondering how many of our younger listeners, given our lack of history courses in school now, had ever even heard of Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, I mean, I think in basic history, they may very well have heard about it. One of the things that I am kind of, my children, both my daughters are grown now, but their grandfathers served as a medic with a Navy corpsman with the Marines island hopping during World War II, so they were very familiar with that. It's very funny to see, I guess it was very poignant to see the last time I went, and we're going over on the boat, and there was obviously a sailor from World War II, a veteran there, and his wife. And the boat, if anybody's ever been there, the boats have basic benches there. And a Japanese man and his wife, obviously of the same vintage, got on. And the interaction between them, you could tell that those were two old enemies. And it still runs deep with a lot of the veterans, but unless you grew up in Hawaii, I'm not sure that you realize, the real impact of Pearl Harbor. Yeah, I mean, it as you said, it brought us into the Second World War, but it was a total sneak attack. You talk about terrorism. I mean, it was the 9/11 basically without. With a country being the terrorist organization, if you will. Completely sneak attack. It was not, we tried to negotiate with them. We were in fact in the process of trying to negotiate with them, and they were trying to declare war on us. And then, of course, the Japanese couldn't get the document of declaration of war given to Secretary Hull, who was the Secretary of War, now the Secretary of Defense, in time before the attack happened. So they, in fact, delivered that to him after the attack had already started, which is it was very much taken as it was. Not only was there an attack, but it was a very big slap in the face. Here you are saying, here's your ultimatum, or else we're going to attack, and the attack is going on.
A philosopher who passed away a few decades ago, named George Santayana, in some papers he called Reason and Common Sense, wrote, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." Prior to World War II, we had sold to Japan, to the Japanese government, tons and tons of scrap metal even though we were at odds with them already because of the invasions of China and a lot of our allies around the Pacific Rim. They had troops in India and so forth and so on. We're expanding at a huge rate. We were trying to stay out of the conflict. And when we sold them that scrap metal, of course, it came back in the form of artillery shells and torpedoes and ships and so on. I believe, looking at the history that we're going through currently, we are headed for the same type of problem once again by emboldening our enemies and economically helping them, even though we know they are an enemy, and sooner or later it's going to blow up on us. We'll be back after another break and kind of explore that and the current problems we have and how they got there currently. One of our sponsors, Grant Defense, manufactures AR-15 rifles right here in Las Vegas. While you can still obtain a personal military-style sporting rifle, check these out before you buy. That's Grant Defense. They're at 5580 South Decatur. And before you buy a personal carry handgun, check out his custom Glocks. Keel Grant makes and modifies these into incredible carry guns. They're located right next to the Dewey Animal Shelter. While you're there, pick up a rescue dog for your home while you are nearby. Thank you. We're back, and coming back to the statement, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. With what's going on today, Mr. Homeland Security guy?
Well, you look at what we have going on right now. Our former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, signed, and a lot of people from the former administration signed off on a deal that would allow about 24% of our stockpiled uranium to be transferred to Canada, which doesn't sound bad. Canada's our neighbor to the north. Unfortunately, a lot of that ended up in Eastern Europe, and a lot of it ended up in Iran. Now, of course, I'm sure that was just used for medical purposes only in Iran. But of course, it's also the fact that you have to remember that her husband, former President Bill Clinton, back in the 90s when he was, and it was one of those things, it wasn't just his administration, it was every administration probably since the 80s has been kicking, if you will, kicking the can down the road with when it comes to North Korea. And one of the sanctions, when they were talking about sanctions, one of the things that North Korea said was, well, give us a nuclear reactor so we can develop nuclear power. And the President Clinton administration signed off on that. So we gave them a nuclear reactor.
Great.
Yeah.
When we were looking at this show and that 24% of our uranium stockpiles of 235, I believe it was, yeah. There was a political cartoon that just fit that was in one of the newspapers I get. That was a cartoon with a couple of colonial politicians saying, Benjamin Franklin sold 24% of our gunpowder to the British, and now we can't fight them very well because we don't have enough gunpowder. We actually sold a reactor to North Korea. We sold or allowed missile technology to disappear into Iran. Now the Iranian government has managed to, apparently, according to the last test they ran, that this missile the North Koreans were using that got the huge range that can hit anywhere in the United States is directly related to the Iranian technology for their missiles. And their nuclear stuff, of course, is now they have their own reactors and so forth and so on. They've been building bombs, as we know.
Well, not according to the government. A great Obama-Iran nuclear deal, which allowed us to, we're supposed to inspect their military and nuclear facilities. Of course, the Iranians are saying, no, you can't really come and look and do that. That was just something on paper.
Especially not the military one.
Yeah,
because that wasn't really part of the deal.
Yeah, and where we have centrifuges and everything that we're developing, and that's the equipment that you need to develop from a nuclear reactor to create power or use the isotopes to do medical research. You're weaponizing the uranium and plutonium into turning it into weapons grade material.
So now, as everybody knows, we have this situation with the North Koreans being on the very cusp, apparently, of making a deliverable nuclear device that can hit the United States, all because basically our government, sold them all the stuff they needed to the various people who hate our guts. And now we're in a position where we don't know how advanced they are. We know apparently they announced, and the technical data that was showing that their last test underground was a nuclear device that and is small enough, apparently, if they can get their last step, this being able to mount it on a rocket that will do re-entry, they can hit any place in the United States. And we are repeating the history that we have not learned from any of the events in the past. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster recently said, actually last Saturday, that the threat of war with North Korea was increasing every day. He doubts that Kim Jong-un, Rocket Man, as we call him, will have a Grinch moment and end his nuclear ambitions without a stronger U.S. actions or sanctions or something. What is clear every time he conducts a missile launch is a nuclear test, he gets better. McMaster said, I'm quoting him here, whether it's a success or failure isn't as important as understanding that over the years he's been learning from his failures, improving, and thereby increasing his threat to all of us. I'm looking at the politicians in Washington arguing about which candidate slept with which girl in his office and who did it and all this stuff. And we are under a threat of annihilation, basically, that could happen within weeks or months. That's a real problem, instead of all this crap that the politicians are going through in Washington.
Well, and it's the problem that you see with everything. It becomes, amassed in this swamp in D.C. Is it seems like they're very myopic. They can't see anything but what goes on in D.C. Secretary of State Tillerson has said on CNN that diplomatic efforts are continuing as long as they possibly can, despite the saber rattling on both sides of the Pacific. Tillerson said those diplomatic efforts will continue until the first bomb drops. Well, that's all well and good unless it drops in Rex Tillerson's backyard. And the problem that I see with this, being a former special agent with the United States Customs also, is the fact that we did a program back in the 80s that was really pushed by President Reagan, and that was a program to go after technology being exported illegally out of this country. And I know in one case that a Cray 24 computer was boxed up, and it was supposed to be shipped to Sweden on a deal, and then we found out that it was going to go from Sweden into the hands of the Soviet Union. So some very enterprising customs agents took the Cray 24 computer out, put a large concrete block that was the approximate size of the computer, and then they wrote something in Cyrillic writing that basically was not very polite or politically correct to the something about yeah, Ivan. But those programs seem to, in the last few years, have really seemed to be pushed away. I've seen cases where we have had some of our own military people selling stuff that is classified, and that is, completely should not be in the hands of anybody but our U.S. military.
They are, I should have had a nuclear engineer on this program to go through what I'm talking about here, but obviously this is a problem that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed now, and all the other political garbage can go away. We're talking about some really serious threats to the United States here. We'll address the rest of this when we get back from this next commercial. Please stay with us and don't go away. And defending lethal force cases. Learn the rules of using deadly force before you have to guess in the middle of a hostile situation. For Fired Up Special, you can get this book for only $10. If you live outside the first 48, please add appropriate postage. Mail orders can be sent to Bob Irwin, P.O. Box 97413, Las Vegas, Nevada 89193. Thanks for ordering one. And we are back. Picking up on this threat we're talking about, any nuclear device exploding over the United States or even nearby, as physicists know, will cause a massive disruption in our power grid from the electromagnetic pulse, which will fry electronics that aren't protected from such. So we're looking at the traffic signal's not working, the computer's not working, certainly your home computer isn't protected from that. The power grids generally aren't. Some of them are. They're trying to catch up. But we will suddenly be in the dark and your computer will be offline for 6 months. Try and survive. Gasoline pumps won't work because the electricity isn't there to pump it, et cetera, et cetera. We'll be in the dark ages all of a sudden. Plus, perhaps millions of radiation poisoning cases. NBC News reported back on the 3rd of this month that defectors who live near North Korea's nuclear testing site said they believe they are suffering from exposure to radiation and fear for the health of their families and their family members that still live there. Quoting one woman that was interviewed by NBC News, she said, "So many people have died, we began calling it the ghost disease. We thought we were dying because we were poor and we ate badly. Now we know it was the radiation." During the last 7 years she lived in the north, the leader at that time, Kim Jong-il, test detonated 2 nuclear bombs near her home. Since then, the son, Kim Jong-un, has tested 4 more. He claimed the last one tested in September and probably confirmed by us, as near as we can tell, was a hydrogen bomb, meaning way smaller and more bang for the buck. According to the World Health Organization, radiation can impair functioning of tissues and organs depending on the level of exposure. At lower doses, of course, there's always a long-term risk of cancer. We know everybody knows the stories of people being burned by radiation, and now the guys that are worked at our test site and so forth are coming down with leukemia and all sorts of diseases that are cancer caused or cancer themselves. That's what could well happen in the United States. Long after we obliterate North Korea, which is presumably what's going to happen, when there's a missile launched, we will have 35 to 40 minutes if it's coming at the continental United States.
Approximately, yes.
To know it's in flight. We have anti-missile stuff that hopefully will hit it. If this goes on and the North Koreans have 6 or 7 or 8 missiles they can launch at once with decoys and the other things we put in them now, some will get through.
You got to remember the one good thing about that is that the North Koreans are pretty much doing I mean, it's missile technology, but it's bottle rockets compared to what we have. I can guarantee you that everything in the North Korean peninsula, North Korean part of the peninsula, has been targeted by our military. When I was there, stationed there in the 70s, we knew even then that there was a nuclear submarine, U.S. nuclear submarine, off the coast of Korea 24/7, 365 days a year for just that. We are not sitting around waiting for Kim Il-jung to decide what he's going to do. We have plans in place. Nobody wants an exchange like this. You know, when you were talking about the electromagnetic pulse. Basically, folks, if you haven't done any work on EMP, anything and everything that is got an electrical circuit in it that is not protected, if it suffers an EMP blast, will be non-operational forever. It fries the circuits. It will kill the power grid. It will be years to get the power grid back on, and then you're going to basically replace everything, including the cars, because if your vehicle is run by a computer, which almost all of them, modern vehicles are, they're not going to run anymore.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about the gas pumps not working.
No,
Your
don't
car
worry about
won't be able to get there.
Your car's it's not gonna run.
Yeah.
Basically, if you ever saw the movie, the original, The Day the Earth Stood Still, when the alien decided to show everybody what he could do, and he basically shut the electricity off worldwide, and everybody's car was stopped and everything. That's what the post-EMP looks like.
So we will basically be destroyed. The counterpunch, of course, will destroy North Korea, and all their leaders and everybody else will be gone. And I'm sure Lenny is speaking correctly that we have the ability to launch, and they'll be hit before whatever they're shooting at us even lands.
Yes.
And which will prevent them from launching. There will be no second strike from them.
They'll get one bottle rocket off, and with any, God willing, our anti-missile systems will knock it out, and then we won't have to worry about anything else coming from North Korea probably ever again. Nobody wants that, I guarantee you, but nobody is going to sit here and let people lob nukes at us.
No, and we have more than a few allies in this whole project with the North Koreans. The Russians have massed an army on their border with North Korea. They're the closest ones to the North Korean testing facilities, but now he's launching them, of course, from further into the country, the new launches that are mobile. The Chinese army has an entire army on their border with North Korea. Neither one of those countries want to see this happen because the nuclear clouds will be circling the Earth forever. Everybody's going to get hit.
Well, and
it's an exaggerated version of I say nobody wins a gunfight because you both get hit,
Well, and you're gonna have the biggest thing is China doesn't want this because China's going to realize this surge of refugees from whatever's left of North Korea. They are going to go north into China, and China doesn't want that. China doesn't want to have a ground zero that close to them. So there's a lot of things that are under consideration here, and I just don't know. The big wild card is Kim Il-jung. What is he going to do?
Yeah, and how predictable is he? I think he probably won't give up his own life, realizing that no matter what happens, He's gone. You never know. Anyway, food for thought. I wish this was a happier show. God bless the veterans from Pearl Harbor and their heirs and children. Thanks for watching Fired Up. Please share these broadcasts with your friends by supporting our troops. There should be a share thing to punch now on the bottom of our show, so you can immediately forward it to all your friends. Please do that and encourage them to do it with others. We'll be back next Thursday here on YouTube on the American Guns and Glory Network. Thanks for listening.